Hey, how's y'all doing? This is your host, Mr. Blow Your Minds, and welcome to Black Minds News Report. First and foremost, I want to say what's good to my family, my subscribers, and my new ones. Welcome to the Black Minds News Report family. We welcome you and thank you for kindly subscribing to the channel. Passerbys, if you should happen to pass by due to the thumbnail or hoping the title in itself, welcome to the most hated show in the black corner of the internet. Been in the business since 2012. You wouldn't be able to tell by the way you see the views is because we are the most suppressed show there is in the YouTube corner, especially the black one. Go down the aisle, we always have a grand opening. Happen to see something that make you feel some kind of way. Remember that the motto of my show is the truth don't need no partner. Now, once again, seems that I have a theme over here. It seems like I'm always seen to be poking and prodding at the police, but that's not the truth. The truth is that sometimes when things are being overbearing on a population, especially on a certain ethnicity of people, it is those who are cut from those people to make advocacy, to bring attention, to bring news to the unknowers and unlearners about how certain things that become, let's say, public information. And that's sometimes because we're caught up into whatever things that keep us inundated with society and play and everything else. Sometimes we have to find places that will bring us the information that we rely on the source. And so as I was doing, as I normally do, I'm looking for certain topics to bring and search for the show. I came across this here, right? And it says, police misconduct such as falsifying evidence is a leading cause of wrongful conviction, study finds. Let me say that again. Police misconduct, such as falsifying evidence, is a leading cause of wrongful convictions, study finds. So I was doing my due diligence, looking for certain topics, and again, the theme has been lately is because this is what has been permeating the ethers, the stories. And so it seems like that there may just be a theme that this channel is particularly studying and focusing directly on police. Again, I will tell you that police are needed. Those who are of society that need to be arrested due to whatever kinds of things of laws that they are breaking, you'll never see black society advocating when people are wrong. Our advocacy comes on the behalf of those who are befuddled with, as this study has found, wrongful convictions. And when you look at wrongful convictions, they are disruptive that time can't actually repeat. What do you mean by that, Mr. Blow Your Mind? If you happen to go through a process based on being wrongfully convicted or charged, do your life continue to be normal from that process? Or is it that you have to put things on hold, deal with this, and kind of work at the same time, but it also causes an inconvenience, right? And sometimes you can be the wrong place at the right time and the right place at the wrong time, right? And so when this should happen to befall any of us, whether by circumstance or just to somebody maliciously using their power to abuse it, then as black media, it is incumbent that we should bring this kind of information not to, again, ostracize the administration, but we got to make our society more aware about there are people who are trying to bring light about things that we keep saying that people want to make it seem as if it's like, it's not as bad as you guys say it is. Okay? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into this article that I had read about. And let me tell you what I read in this article. And so what it was talking about is how when you look at police officers, those who are sworn to uphold the laws, that sometimes that their actions, which could include things of witness tampering, violent interrogations, falsifying evidence. If you take all these possibilities, what end up happening is you have misconduct that leads to what they say wrongful convictions. Someone could hear me and know and have been through it. Others may hear this and be mystified at the fact that this kind of conduct even exists. And there's those who will just straight out deny the fact that this is just propaganda. But a study came out and they released it on Tuesday. And it came from the National Registry of Exonerations. And what they were putting all their attention to doing this study is that they wanted to see the role that police and the prosecutors, when people who end up becoming convicted and then had to go through the process to determine that everything that they went through was a false conviction. Now, I don't know if you have what it takes to actually put your mind's eye into the position of a person who's gone through that, or personally you have gone through that, right? And so what we see is that this National Registry of Exoneration, it had studied and went through about, they say, 2,400 convictions of defendants that went through this process and had to go through time and money and whatever other in-betweens through this process. They end up coming to be found innocent of what they originally had been charged. Now, according to this National Registry of Exonerations, they said it took 30 years. This is a 30-year period for them to come to the conclusion of what they're going to state as what I read in this article. And that again, 30 years of 2,400 cases is saying that they had to go and meticulously go through each and every to find the dots connecting to come to a conclusion. So that doesn't mean somebody might say that there's only 2,400, but 2,400 is just representing 30 years of getting a conclusion. There have been many, many more, but because, and I'll show you something later on that will show that even those who would have first-hand knowledge still could not resolve issues that seemed that it come up an undetermining result at the end. And so with all this finding that they did, they come to determine that 35% of these cases that were involved, a lot of them had misconduct, what they say, by police. And they said more than half, 54%, was misconduct, not just by the police, but also the prosecutor. So you got this National Registry of Exoneration. What they did, they made a project. And what they did is they started to collect data on wrongful convictions based on everything that took place, especially with the May 25th, the death of George Floyd, that the whole nation and outside have witnessed. That actually began the protests and the chant for reform, even though there had been prior deaths before, but this one seemed to have been the culmination part where everybody said enough was enough, right? And so when you think about misconduct, and how this will lead to wrongful convictions. But there is another element when you talk about misconduct that sometimes don't make the light of day. There are certain cases that don't become national attention, right? So there's a lot of unsung cases that never make light, earshot, or even people protesting about, right? But we cannot think that even in those, what we say, lower cases, that somehow they're still not the same modus operandi, which is to have the resilience of secrecy and deception by those, as the study said, which is police and prosecutors working together, that end up, according to their study, creating a false conviction. And so there was a professor from the University of Michigan Law, name was Samuel Gross, and he is one of the authors of the study. And he was quoted saying that the basic underlying truth is, if you're innocent of a crime and you were convicted of it, the chance of it ever coming to light are first not great, and second gets worse and worse the less serious a crime it is. If you're convicted of a misdemeanor and you're innocent of it, the chance of anybody caring is very low. Right? So again, you can be an unsung hero going through a process that because that a person or an officer who may feel ill will towards you or decide that this is something they're going to put you through, you go through it. But because of not having the magnitude to gravitate and get a national attention, you get swept under the rug. Only you and those who are probably your immediate families and friends are probably the only ones who know that this took place. So the question becomes, is there really something going on, or is it just people crying and moaning, especially we as BADOS, Black American Descendants of Slaves, and then how the nation seems to be split when it comes to their perspective of your life versus how they think it's disrupting because they don't want to hear about it. But when a study comes out like this, does this have merit for those who say they don't want to hear, or is it just to turn a blind eye and say, well, even if that be the case, that's not my problem. You deal with it, but don't interrupt when it's my pastime. I don't want to hear about it. Then does that speak volume to the people who mindset and heart and spirit is like that? Okay. And so we got this same professor. He was talking about that. He said all police officers, or most police officers, and that he says that it's disturbing that the fact that it happens, but it happens on a regularity. Let me say that again. Now remember, this is a professor of law. Okay? He's a professor of law. And from Michigan, and he was one of the authors of the studies of what I am disclosing to you, and that the fact that what he just, as I quoted him saying, right, and that he says, well, if you don't, a lot of people like say, we don't like to encompass and say all, not all. But okay, let's say we don't say all, we're going to say most, right? So when you all encompass and blanket everybody, but he say most. And him being a law professor said disturbing to him, and then he finds that through doing this study that he found that there was a lot of regularities in the same pattern of what he and the researchers have found. And matter of fact, I got something here. Let me go ahead and we're going to let's show this here, and check this out, and then I'll go on more with it. But just for your information, check this out. We shall be right back.
On this Tuesday, the investigations are complete into many of the allegations of police misconduct during the protests that broke out here in Columbus earlier this summer after the death of George Floyd there in Minnesota. Well, city leaders and teams of attorneys releasing the findings today. NBC4's Dan Perlman joining us now live. And Dan, we understand that the team leading these investigations says this was not an easy job.
No, Darlene, it absolutely wasn't. According to them, they say that they had a hard time in many cases identifying the officers involved in these incidents. They also say the contract with the Fraternal Order of Police presented its own issues in reaching these conclusions that have the mayor and a few other leaders pretty upset.
I can tell you, I was surprised and in many cases angered at the results.
The results Mayor Andrew Ginther is discussing are those from the Baker-Hostetler investigation. The law firm investigating possible police misconduct during the protests this summer looked at 41 complaints. Today, partners announcing 4 officers were exonerated for their conduct. 1 complaint was sustained, so the officer in that situation faces discipline within CPD. 9 complaints were unfounded, 2 were withdrawn. Investigators telling us they were unable to sustain the allegations in 25 complaints. That means there wasn't enough evidence to prove or disprove the claims. The attorney saying in many of those cases, officers weren't wearing name tags, badges, or body cameras. Chief Quinlan saying a new system is now in place so that won't again happen. But the attorneys also say the contract with the Fraternal Order of Police posed its own roadblocks. One of the most significant, the requirement that all citizen complaints be investigated within 90 days, unless otherwise authorized.
The FOP's decision to withhold its agreement to extend the deadlines in the cases for which we've requested them was absolutely unreasonable.
The mayor telling me that 90-day window is one of the issues about which he hopes to renegotiate with the police union. But he tells me the next step to police reform rests with voters approving a citizens review board in November.
I think with their support, if they support issue 2, I'll be able to go to the collective bargaining table, the negotiating table with the FOP in good faith and work out some of these issues.
Now, today I did reach out to the FOP's president. No response from him quite yet on today's findings. Now, one person reacting to today's findings, City Council President Shannon Hardin. You may remember he was involved in a pepper spraying incident during those protests. At 6 o'clock, you're going to hear how he is responding to what the law firm found. Local for you. And
All right, we are black, right? So that was a report that was coming up out of Minnesota, right? And it was talking about how they did their study. The results end up making the mayor had his statement. And so is this study that is done here, is there some validness to it, or is it just, well, you know, it's just a couple cases, right? But each case represents somebody's life, correct? Okay. So we just say that the research has found that misconduct by police and prosecutors, according to what this study came out and said, is that it is the leading causes of disproportionate false convictions. Especially when you're talking about black defendants. Now, what they state is that 78% of the black defendants who were wrongly accused of murder were convicted because of some type of, they say, of misconduct. Let me say that again. 78% of black defendants who were wrongly accused of murder were convicted because of some type of misconduct. The number is only 64% for white defendants, right? So there's about a 14% difference. And some people will look at that as, well, you know, okay. But again, remember, if you're a smaller population in the country, according to what the statistics tell us, When your number is greater than a group that is bigger than you, is that not something of alarm or a flag that needs to be, hey, there's a problem over here? Or we just supposed to say, well, we just have a lot of bad apples amongst us, and this is why. And there's a lot of people who would agree on that behalf to say that, okay, that's what the study is showing, that these people, and the reason why they're going through this is because they are wrong. But that's not what the study is saying here. The study is saying there's somebody and some people in cahoots that might be creating such situations. And then they said also that there was a wider gap when they talk about 87% of black defendants later found innocent. Let me say that again. They went on later and talked about there was a wider gap, that 87% of black defendants later found innocent, and they were sentenced to death. And those were victims of official misconduct. Sentenced to death. And come to find out that there was official misconduct and had them sentenced to death. Now, they say also that for whites, it was 68% of those white defendants. Once again, 87% when you are a smaller group versus that who are much bigger, who are 4 times bigger, according to what the statistics tell us. But you have 87 to their 68. Is that not alarming? So now the study came out on Tuesday, but it said back in Monday, they said the National Registry of Exonerations said they had about 2,670 people since 1989, they said had been exonerated. Let me say that again. As of Monday, before the Tuesday that they released this study, the same people who conducted this, which is the National Registry of Exonerations, said since 1989 to the present date, which is what, 2020? So what is that? 31 years? So 31 years, they said there was 2,670 people who had been exonerated. And this list, they say, continues to grow. Just continue to grow regularly. Regularly, huh? That's what they say, regularly. And so, you have to look at some of these images. No, not that one. Not that one. That's not the one you want. That's the one you want. That's the one you want right there. That's not the one you want, dude. The wrong one. Thank you. All right, see the brother right there? All right, see that brother right there? Here it is, you're going through this process because, again, you have to go through the process. Somebody can be having ill will and hiding behind and doing their things, but these are lives of people. These are not just, numbers and statistics, right? These are individuals. These are people who have been affected. You have stained their lives. Now, am I saying that everybody who comes across that are innocent? No, I'm not saying that. We're just saying according to what the study and what they're producing here. You don't do a study to come to determine that something is and then to say, oh, that's just a couple people, right? Maybe that's what they want us to just look at this and turn a blind eye. And a lot of people who will sit in stadiums and boo and who have disdain about the solidarity that you see people, even though they make money, right? They now considered millionaires and rich and have fame, but they act as if like somehow these people are not from the same people who are living in the conditions that they once were, but due to their gifts and talent and somebody looking that they could benefit off of them, that somehow there's a disconnect between them and them as if they're not like their family. Well, what does that tell about yourself, right? Anyway. So, and they start talking about in this study they started talking about hiding evidence, right? They said they were talking about hiding evidence. And in this study, what they end up finding is that when hiding evidence is a favorable way that for a defendant, this is the most common way by doing misconduct. Let me say that again. The most favorable way to a defendant, the most common type of misconduct is hiding evidence, right? So if you have to rig the game in order to get somebody in the position, then how legit is it? Or how legit are you? But again, those who are avid watchers of my show, and we talk about, like, again, you got to remember that to be a police officer and to move up in ranks, it's a merit job based on, convictions and arrests and, all that stuff to get into the higher echelons of rank and file. So when you have a whole lot of ambitious, young men and women who, I remember getting a comment from an individual, and he said about 50,000, 50K is what their salaries are. And again, we as being Americans, we have champagne tastes, but we got water money. And so what happens is we spend more than what we make. So we need more to fill in for the excess that we do, because anything you buy on credit, you getting it then, and then you paying more later. But while I'm adding more to it, it's eating up all my salary. So the ambition leads to, I need to be able to, there's a position that I could probably attain, and whatever merit you need to, get to apply, then people become, right, the use for your elevation. And so something could be almost and seem to be close to needing to close a case, but I need to add a little something to it to make it stick. But look at the person whose life that is, they're going to be affected. And if you have a non-care attitude, or you have a, according to how this country has deemed we as BADOS from the historical point, well, let them sort it out. If I win, I win. If not, the taxpayers will take over that for me, right? So what they did is they went and they researched. They said they found about 5 murder trials in which they found that in their findings, they found that the prosecutor was concealing evidence. And a lot of it was, according to what they was talking about, as a cause of death. In one case is where a woman was convicted of killing her boyfriend. And so what happened is the prosecutors decided not to disclose the medical reports that had found that the boyfriend actually had died of suicide. Let me say that again. They did some research. They cited about 5 murder trials. And this one particular murder trial, and then it was talking about that the prosecutors had concealed evidence about the cause of death. And one of the cases where it was a woman. And this woman was convicted for killing her boyfriend. And the prosecutors decided not to disclose the medical report. Now, the medical report would have had exonerated her. But again, ambition and somebody have their sights on trying to get and obtain another position, you become, if we say this is a monster, the food for the monster to chew on. But this is your life. Now, does accidents happen? Yes. Does mishaps happen? Yes. But according to this finding, it said this is not neither one of those. These are intentional. And then you didn't disclose this medical report that would have had determined to found that this boyfriend had died of suicide, and then you let this person go through the rigmarole and scar them for life and going through the process and whatever things that they had the turmoil to go through. But again, everybody have different situations in their life. Those people who this does not relate to, you cannot understand it. But there's many of us and have family members that's not personal to a lot of us, right? They even talked about there were some rape cases where there was some exoneration, which they say are few, right? I rarely ever find in a rape case where this happens, but a particular one they did find, and they were saying that how the authorities had concealed the evidence. And when they went and looked at the history of the person who was making the complaint as saying rape, in the history, they say modus operandi, you know what I'm saying? That's your MO, how you move. Well, according to in her history, she had false rape allegations priors. She had prior ones. So what they did is they just ignored it because they wanted the conviction, right? So here's a person that is being accused for rape and goes through there and then is labeled as a rapist. A lot of people know about that. You be labeled a rapist and you up in there. Well, some things may bad and they happen to you, correct? So they even had where there was a couple, they said some child sex abuse cases. And they were talking about how the prosecutor and the child welfare worker, they both concealed that the statement that came from the victim, which was the child said it had not, in fact, had not been molested. But they went on with it and said that they did. So you let somebody go through there and been labeled that as a child molester. Imagine that. And then they have cases where you have police who will falsify their claims that the victim, that they became the victim, right? Kind of like what we seen the other day when I did about the black Lyft driver. Now, again, they said Roderick, the reports I was reading was saying Roderick Walker. Then later on I hear Robert Walker. Then there was some report that was saying that the sheriff's name was, I was like, why are they not getting it right? What is they trying to, twist it up in such a way? But anyway, remember when you go back and you see that, if you didn't see that, send you over to there to watch that video. But pretty sure you probably be listening over here. But remember in that video, you seen when they were down there wrestling with they were, on top of him. And one is kind of choking him out, the other one trying to smother his mouth. You hear the officer yell, my hand, right? My hand. Okay. But that was during all that commotion that was happening. Now, remember there was an individual who was in this car that was recording. And while he was in this car recording, he was saying, hey, now again, I don't know if that's the one that I showed, but it may not have been. But there's a tape out there where you see there's an individual who's across the street who is yelling and telling them, calling, trying to get their attention off of him to get on him. And afterwards they get him up. The cop looks at him and he said, he wasn't doing anything to you. Then he starts shaking his hand, right? Gesturing that, he was my hand, right? So was that true or not? Or was that a defense mechanism to keep himself from being snuffed out? But then as the report is talking about how police officers can falsify claims that they are victims of assault by the defendants, right? And so in this particular situation here, in this one case, it was Chattanooga, Tennessee, where it said a police officer had beat a defendant in a reentry facility because he defended himself, right? And so what happened is the individual name was Adam Tatum. And he got sentenced to 2 years in prison for assaulting an officer. But then he had to go through the whole process of going to court and that whole nonsense. And later on, he ended up being what? Exonerated. And the only reason why he got exonerated is because the video came out. And what the all seeing eye caught was different than the testimony of what the officer had gave. Right? So now here it is. Again, we're not against police. But if you have to fabricate a situation in order to make it stick and be merit, how is that respectable? How can somebody respect somebody if you got to sit there and lie to put me in a situation that you get to go home and life is normal for you, but you put somebody else through hell that may not only deserve to be there and maybe ain't built for that. So here it is. He had to go in there, do that process, and then after this whole situation, because they said, well, there was no provocation, that whole situation. So what they end up doing is settle the case for $125,000. Does the process of you going through that merit, again, the money? It's kind of like yesterday doing the show about Breonna Taylor and how they gave her gave the family the $12 million based on the simple fact you still haven't got to the criminal part, right? Does the money suffice for what took place? Some people will say, yeah. Some people are looking at this as, no, this doesn't do it. But, the exchange is a small gesture, but according to the game that you say with the lady with the scales in her hand and law and order, it's about justice. But justice seems to be two-sided here. I understand teamwork. I understand being a team player. And then you have captains and coaches that, again, when nobody's being corrected and you let things run amok, it becomes the citizenry, the ones who are trying to obey, who become your cannon fodder for, again, a lot of those who are trying to marry to move themselves up. Or just have a confrontation with you that they say, well, I'm going to put you through this just because you're agitating the shit out of me. Does it happen? Only they can tell you the truth, whether that is or not, right? And so when they talk about how the consequences are in these situations, before we go there, take that and then we come back. Take one. Do this and be right back, y'all. Check out. All right, we are back, right? So we're back. So they talk about the consequences, right? But before we go into this consequence part, before end us up, they talk about, I don't know, they had this new system that they were trying to implement, right? Now, are there more efficient ways, scientific ways, using today's analytics and science and putting it together and come up with a more efficient way that could help to deter crime or, have good hunches? If there's a good, fair way of doing it, the citizenry will be behind it, because guess what? It is the citizenry who is the ones who are paying for it, right? Whether it be for the resources to have better facilities and training, or when you do wrong and paying, right? I mean, it's right. So I want y'all to see this, because this was kind of, they were implemented, but then again, according to what we're talking about, this finding here, they ask yourself, hey, this is what probably kind of deterred it. So just in case you didn't hear about it or see it, check this out and be right back.
Los Angeles, California, second most populous city in the United States, spread out over 468 square miles. With nearly 4 million residents and fewer than 10,000 police officers sworn to protect and serve, keeping order is a full-time job.
We are playing probabilities and putting officers in the right place at the right time.
To make the most of their resources, police captains like Sean Malinowski of the LAPD and other police departments across the country are turning to a new tactic to help stop crime before it happens. It's called predictive policing.
It calculates for the next 12 hours in the future what areas have the highest probability of a crime occurring. And then what we do is we provide that information to the officers, and then the officers go out and they try to prevent those crimes from occurring.
The predictive policing program used by the LAPD didn't come out of a police academy. It's based on research by a team of mathematicians and social scientists at UCLA, trying to predict where and when crime is most likely to happen.
I'd had these ideas that really human behavior is actually really quite predictable, and that you can study human behavior and understand where crime patterns come from in a very quantitative way.
With funding from the National Science Foundation, anthropology professor Jeff Brantingham teamed up with mathematics professor Andrea Bertozzi and others to analyze crime patterns and develop computer models to simulate criminal behavior. Their crime prediction model is based on the same algorithms used to predict earthquakes and aftershocks.
Once an event happens, it triggers another event. And so you can apply this idea to gang crimes, you can apply it to burglaries, you can apply it to automobile theft. There are many types of activities for which this idea is very relevant.
Thousands of pieces of crime data from the LAPD, including locations, times, and dates of past crimes, are processed by the software program known as PredPol to calculate and predict the potential criminal activity for an area at a certain time.
And those predictions are delivered back to the police departments in a way that allows them to use it in real time.
All right, we are black, right? So predictive policing, right? So add predictive policing with the study, and you could have a Mellicott cocktail, correct? Now, that was a story that had been done by NBC, and it was talking about how LA being the second most populous state in the United States. It has about 4 million residents. And the whole job of policing is what? To keep law and order. So you got 4 million people talking about there in California, LA, that you have to have efficient, better, whether it be equipment or tactics, so that you can try to, cover a lot of grounds and try to do preventative measures. Nothing wrong with it. They say, an inch of prevention is a pound of cure, right? So we understand that, right? Ain't nothing wrong with that. And so the whole science of this is saying that they want to put police officers at the right place at the right time. But again, we all kind of know that police are kind of like, remember at the end of the movie, Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, after him and John Saxon, and then those who they had locked in, and they let them all out and they fought everybody on the Hans Island. And then Bruce go ahead and kick Mr. Han and had the spear through his back. Then when he came up, John Saxon was, out of breath. He sees Bruce getting the thumbs up. And then who was coming? Who was coming at the end, y'all? The helicopters with the British dude that, remember, he was in the bed sleep. I don't care who he is. Wake up. Get him up. Right? So at the end, they done did all the damn fighting. Here come the cavalry. It's too late now. That's kind of like, that's how our police is, right? They come there. I mean, what are the percentages that police are there when shit happening, right? For those that have happened, I'm pretty sure they can give a hell of a pride testimony because it saved their life or prevent whatever. Great. But we're going to say the majority of the percentages, they're not going to be there. They're going to be afterwards, right? But they're saying that this technology is going to help them to try to, scientifically, analytically, and using, they say, what? Human behavior. So you study human behaviors, that also, to me, tells me that you know how to poke and prod to make people move and do certain things. But that's another topic for another time, though, right? And so this predictive policing is to give them like predictions for the next, they say 12 hours. So those, again, I think police shifts are 12 hours. I think they're about 12 and 12, right? So those who come in on the next shift, the data will tell them based on, this whole situation that, this could be what it is. And, it could work. It could work, but then we have to also ask ourselves, when we're talking about computer models, right? And they talk about how they simulate crime behaviors. A computer and the program is only as good as the person who imputes it. Let me say that again, right? That a computer model and that which creates to simulate crime behavior is according to the programmer. Now, if the programmer is biased, racist, then will not the program in itself? Because again, we done did many stories over here where they come to find out that facial recognition, that they kept using the same type of facial recognition when it came to black folks, but were more distinguished or distinctive when it came to white and other people. So a lot of people will be considered by that system of facial recognition to be coming positive when it didn't fit them. But that was based on them inputting it. Now, some people just say it's science, it's technology. You know what I'm saying? They'll tell you algorithm. And me, myself, being the most hated show on the black corner of the internet, I can tell you personally that there is a lot of bias that can be done internal. And again, people will just generalize and say certain things and then be like, okay, see, look, just the AI. It's just, you're just not putting in the right tags, and right? There's going to be a whole lot of that. But everybody's going to deny the fact that the people who are programming based on who they are is going to be how the compute is going to be, whether it be honest, straightforward, or going to be biased in it too. And so, all that is all in good. But can you predict? I remember reading a story about it, and it was talking about how it's talking about predictive, and it would say that a particular people would come up in their system, and they would go to the people's house and would arrest them because they said, based on the predictive policing, your name came up as on the top 5 that you're about to do a crime, and would arrest them. Let me say that again. Let me tell you what I read in that. It said that there was people that they would go into people's house based on the fact that that name came up as high probability of you about to go do a crime. Man sitting in the house, the police come talking about you about to do a crime and arrest him on that. Is this considered flawed technology, right? And then it said based on the statistics and the data and the algorithm said you're going to do it. I don't know if y'all haven't heard that. I don't know if you ever heard that before. So what ended up happening with that, and then when you're talking about here with the misconduct, that somebody's sitting here trying to debate, hey, what are you talking about? I ain't done nothing. Your MO says that high probability, because this is happening over here, you're going to do this crime, so we're going to arrest you now to prevent that. Wait a minute now. Can there be abuses in that? So anyway, so again, they talk about these consequences going back to this article here. But that's that predictive policing. A lot of cities that drop that because again, just as I said, there's always a possibility of bias and racialness, even though they try to make it seem as technology. But it all boils down to the fact that who are the ones programming, and if they don't have an agenda or the people who they work for want to have a slight, you know what I'm saying? So it's like you could be gaming, right? You could be gaming, and there's certain, let's say for instance, if somebody ever played that FIFA, right? The pure black the man is, to seem like he weak, he ain't as good as the white cats on there. Maybe it's just me, but if you ever played the FIFA on there, that's how they be getting down. But like, how come the black dude is like this? And even when you make some of the other cats on there, when you play other sporting games, other than them being specific about a particular player, when you do into the my players and stuff like that, right? You know what I'm saying? It'd be like, why the white cat is this and why the black dude like that? Is that by coincidence, or that according to the design of those who are inputting the information to make the individual based on their interpretation, right? So anyway, so we'll see that according to also in this study, was talking about the consequences of police officers being disciplined or convicted for the crimes. It was only about 19%. of exoneration based on the fact that they were involved in the types of misconduct as I talked about earlier. But they said it's 5 times higher than those for those who are prosecutors for misconduct, account for about 30% of the cases. So they don't really get prosecuted for all that. They just go through the rigmarole. It is what it is. You yourself go through it, and that's how it's going to be. Now, some people going to be like, this could be a bunch of crop. Some people can say, okay, it is what it is. Right? You tell me what you think, right? Right? You tell me what you think, right? Again, I'm just giving you the report, give you some insights, some things that I looked at. Package it up for you real good. Give you something, to chew, some fat to chew on, to think about. For those who kind of on the fence or who were one-sided about situation and just think, there can't be, there's a term they call, I think it's called sovereign immunity. And the term means the king can't do no wrong, right? Who in their right mind can say that they're imperfect on this land? Who can say that they do everything, even though you say by the book, and that you don't make mistakes? Who could say that? None of us can say that. But to make a system where all that is about we're right, you're always wrong, and that the people who are doing their jobs don't have luggage from their uprearing or affiliations, associations, and that it can spill over into the job. And if your job is dealing with, peoples and humans and all that stuff, that it could actually cause a lot of damage, whether intent or with intent. So again, tell me what y'all think. Again, for those who want to help support this channel, not in a monetary way, but just go over to Black MINDZ TV. That's BLAK MINDZ TV. Go over there, subscribe over there. Help me to get up right now about 19. Get me up to 2025. I would appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed over here, do so. Comment, share, make a comment. Tell me, hey, Mr. Blow, you might think you're full of shit. Whatever it might be, it's EEOC over here. I'm not one to go block. My skin a little tough. But, and once in a while, if you say something that I think that's very interesting, I'll actually do a show based on what your comment is. So again, this is the Black MINDZ News, the most hated show on the black corner of YouTube. Until the next show, y'all. Until the next show.